Welcome back, everyone. Hoping out there enjoyed your weekend. We've got a big cool down on the way for many with several cold fronts throughout the week. Plus, the tropics are starting to become active, whereas we're tracking yet another system that's coming out of the Atlantic. So let's take a look at the big picture this morning and take a look at the big cool down for a good part of the central U.S. If you live anywhere in this blue shaded area, you're definitely feeling the effects this morning with some of these areas across portions of the Dakotas, back into Iowa, back in even towards into Nebraska. We're actually into the 20s this morning. A very chilly air mass, and there's even a stronger cold front that will actually settle down and move down through on Wednesday and into Thursday, dipping all the way down into the deep south. So everybody's eventually going to get into the action with this cooler air for the middle of October. Here's the setup as we head to tomorrow. We've got that deepening trough that will just likely expand across a good part of the Ohio Valley, as well as into the mid-Atlantic, into the Northeast, and eventually shifting those cooler anomalies back towards Missouri, eventually into Arkansas, and eventually this will backdoor into Texas, and then sink further south into the southeast, and eventually getting all the way down into Florida, while this ridge of high pressure finally loses its grip across a good part of the west and gets replaced with this trough that's building up there towards the Aleutian Islands. That is going to bring some changes across the western regions as we get throughout the week, and bring actually additional showers and thunderstorms across the Pacific Northwest, but more importantly, break the heat wave that they've been dealing with across the West for much of the last, seems like forever. So let's take a look at the tropics, because we are still in hurricane season. We've got about another 6 weeks left. You can see most of the lower 48 continues to remain kind of high and dry, not much precipitation to contend with back behind those cooler fronts. But in the tropics, you can definitely see some convection down there into south of Jamaica. The National Hurricane Center doesn't have a threat on this yet, but I feel like they will over the next couple of days, because we are seeing a conglomerate of showers and thunderstorms starting to bubble up across that region. And there are indications we have slow development possible down there in the far outskirts of the Caribbean. But well off your screen actually is Invest 94L. That is going to be our next system we're actually tracking in the Atlantic. And that actually right now the National Hurricane Center has a 50% probability this becomes our next named storm, which would be Nadine. So you can see it continues basically due west, because I think it's going to continue to remain on the weaker side. Remember, a weaker storm has a tendency to keep moving further west. A stronger storm has more of a tendency to lift further north and eventually head out to sea. But this is continuing to remain on the weaker side. So that's why the National Hurricane Center is forecasting for this little tropical wave, which is labeled Invest 94L. It's labeled Invest because it's under investigation essentially before it possibly takes our next named storm, as this continues to cross into the Windward Islands sometime this weekend. And I think eventually we'll head up maybe north of areas of Puerto Rico and eventually head towards the Dominican Republic in about a week time frame, going forward. So if we look at the overall ensemble guidance, it kind of hints at some of the bullish activity. Right now it gives it about a 70 to possibly 80% probability of it becoming a storm by the time it gets closer into those islands. And here's the second area of disturbed weather that we're also tracking. Again, the National Hurricane Center doesn't have a highlighted threat on this, but if they do put a threat, this would be the likely area of the next area. They would put kind of a yellow shaded area of an area to watch, because of this just conglomerate of showers and thunderstorms, this Central America gyra type atmosphere that can and has been known to bubble up some storms this year. So if we take a look at the overall all guidance and to take a look at all the models, you can definitely see most of them are pretty compacted right in a line of that westward track. Some put it a little bit further south, some put it a little bit further north, and all that really is hinting at some of the stronger overall models are becoming a little bit stronger. And then if it does take that stronger route early, it will definitely have a tendency to lift it further north as well. The lower, active, less intensity models will keep it further south and keep it that due west direction. So if we take a look at the overall intensity guidance, most of them are fairly decently bullish of this becoming our next named storm in about 4 to 5 days from now. So right now, the National Hurricane Center has it about a 50% probability it does in fact take a name. So if you look at all the models together, yeah, there's a lot of them saying, hey, this could be our next named storm. There are some of them in about 5 to 6 days that actually bump it up to that hurricane type intensity. Those would be likely the ones that are lifted further north away into the open waters. And if it does take that position, it will be having a more tendency to definitely turn it further north. So we'll be tracking this, but it's still, it's beyond 7 days before it kind of gets closer to some of those islands where it starts to affect land. But closer to home, let's talk about the cold air, because we do have another reinforcing shot of another cold blast, and this is the one that's going to sink all the way down into the deep south. So yes, we're talking those areas into Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, portions of Texas, even Louisiana, I think gets in the action, Mississippi, Alabama, back into Georgia, into the Carolinas. You kind of get clipped into our western regions, but nonetheless, a good part of the country is going to feel this cooler shot of air, and it's going to hang around, for at least a couple of days as we head into Wednesday and Thursday. And here's your morning temperatures heading into Wednesday morning. Yes, all those areas that are highlighted into the blue, that is your freezing mark, folks. So some areas are seeing those freezing temperatures, especially into Nebraska this morning. You're going to continue to get a frost and freeze, and then that will only sink further south into Kansas, start entering to Missouri, and eventually start heading into Kentucky, back into Tennessee, and even get dipping down in the 40s in northern Mississippi, and even those upper 30s in northern Alabama. Yes, I'm talking to you, Birmingham area. So, but look at the temperatures, as we head into Thursday morning. But overall, the clear skies is really going to be the culprit of the radiational cooling, right? I mean, clear skies, light winds really allows those cooler anomalies to sink further down to the surface. That's one of the reasons why most areas going to be able to drop so much, but just because the mass clear skies with this dominant ridge of high pressure bringing in that cooler, drier air. Cooler, drier air, just like Arctic air, sinks fast and goes to the surface. And but it's also dry as well. So, I mean, there's not going to be much precipitation, on the backside of this. That is definitely one of the reasons why it's able to cool as much as it's going to. So we're not done there, because I feel like we have another cool shot on the way, but this one is going to be for those areas out west. So by the time we head into Friday, that jet stream will start to buckle. So whenever it buckles, well, we're going to bring down those cooler temperatures and bring some instability back across the western region. So it's likely going to start raining again for a good part of Washington and Oregon, for those areas into northern California, but further south, going into Idaho, Montana, back into Wyoming. Yeah, we're talking snow. It's going to be cold enough to snow, and at least to some of the higher elevations, we're up, we're talking above at least 5,000, likely 7,000 feet up in the air. But overall, definitely some mountain snows will start coming back in the picture, but you can definitely see a good part of the Carolinas continue to dry out. That's definitely a good thing, and much of Florida. So for those areas that get hit hard with Milton as well as into Helene, I think you're going to continue to remain on the drier side. There's not much activity happening even as we head into the weekend for those areas, which is good. But what we'll be watching is more moisture coming back across the west. And look at this, folks. I think we're done with the triple digits in Phoenix after today. They could probably say goodbye for those heat wave. And now we're actually going to be talking some rain moving back into the picture for, yes, Arizona, New Mexico, puts it back into West Texas. Some of these areas that are really kind of bone dry, hasn't seen much. You're going to have some instability coming back into play with that other cool down coming in from the northwest. That's going to lift up the atmosphere, bring back some of that Gulf moisture and squeeze it and kind of wring it out over areas of West Texas. That'll swing it into kind of a more of a monsoonal flow back there into New Mexico, into Arizona. So they'll get some beneficial rains out of this deal. And this would likely be that Invest 94 L by then, likely probably just north of the the Puerto Rico region. And then as we head into the weekend, heading into Sunday, I think the dry line kind of gets a little bit more active across West Texas, especially there into Mexico, wringing out that precipitation again. There's the Invest 94 L that will be highlighting across this region. So as we keep tracking this again, we're getting up almost 7 days out. But overall, here's your precipitation for the next 7 days. You can definitely see for much of those areas that get hit hard from Helene and Milton will continue to dry out. So that is definitely a good thing and helping with the cleanup for them, the devastating storms. And then for those areas out west, will bring back some more instability. So some of this is going to be in the form of snow into the interior regions, but then much needed precipitation back into Utah, into Arizona, back into New Mexico, into Colorado, eventually heading into the Plains region, into West Texas, especially like the Texas Panhandle. But I do feel as we head into maybe next Monday, right? So this is second season for severe storms. We haven't really had much technically for fall standards, but I feel like that's going to change as we head into next week. So we are going to be seeing that deepening trough, and that's going to bring back some more moisture back into the play. And then we see this feature coming back into the plains. So we're likely going to be talking about severe storms starting again by the 21st time frame, heading into that Monday, back into say the Texas Panhandle, western Oklahoma, back into Kansas and into Nebraska. Those storms will likely continue to go into Missouri, into Iowa. That's going to be a pretty fairly decent significant threat highlighted across that region as we head into that next Monday time span. So obviously, while we'll continue to fine tune the details on that as we get closer. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch my next update. Why protect you before and after the storm.